Good evening, this is Avraham Shira. Welcome to our daily class in Rabbi Nachman on Patreon. We're starting a new Torah tonight, Torah Gimel, the third Torah of Likutei Moharan. And he begins with another of the Rabba Bar Bar Chana stories from the Talmud. They're pretty outrageous metaphoric visions that he uttered these things 2,000 or so years ago. I can't even imagine that he expected anybody to understand what he was saying. And for centuries, students and scholars would go through the Talmud and gloss over these stories because they were so difficult to understand. Rabbi Nachman came along, after all these years and explains them in a way that illuminates, the generation. It may be more than one generation. So he starts to tell us again, Rabba Bar Chana, he has a vision. Amar Rabba Bar Chana, ledidi chazili hahu akrukta. I was shown a frog. A frog, tahave ka'akra da Hagronia, that was like the city of Hagronia. V'akra da Hagronia kamahave. Well, how big was this city of Hagronia? Shitin bate, 60 houses. It doesn't sound much like a city, more like a village. But 60 house-sized frog, that's a big frog. Let's face it. V'ata tanina ubala'a. And a Talmudic rabbi came and took it. And then ata pushkansa ubala'a letanina. The Talmudic master came and consumed the frog, and then a female raven came and consumed the Tana. Well, what is going on? Vasalik yativ bilana. And then the raven flew up and sat down, nestled in a tree. Natachazeh, and come and see, kama have, kama nefish chela dilana. How great is the power of that tree? They can hold a raven that swallowed something, a teacher that was equivalent to a frog that had swallowed a town the size of 60 houses. What is going on? Now this Torah goes on for a long ways. And before we get to the understanding of the story, he's going to teach us a lot of concepts. And these concepts are going to be woven into an explanation of the story at the end. So we won't really understand the whole thing until we get to the end. But just the imagery is rather shocking. And he tells us to begin with, Hine, Misha Shomea Nikina Miminagen Rasha, somebody who hears music, a melody specifically, from a unholy singer, an unholy troubadour. Kashelo lavorata bore. It is difficult for his service of God. In other words, the influence of this music is going to adversely affect his service of Hashem. How could that be? You turn on the radio, you hear some singer, some troubadour. I guess I like that word, troubadour. who's coming from a very, let's say, not holy place. It's difficult for his avodat Hashem. Why? What do you think? Kihine kol nikina nishmaat nimshechet min hatziporim. Now he gives us another secret of Kabbalah, that the voice of the singer is drawn from the tziporim, birds. Which birds? Kedita b'midrash, as it's brought in the midrash, mipnei ma mitzorah teharato tuluya b'shtei tzipurim chayot tohorot. We have the concept of the mitzorah in the Torah, which is somebody who is afflicted with tzarat, which is a biblical skin disease. Oftentimes, people translate that as leprosy, but that's not terribly clear that it's leprosy, but I call it a biblical skin disease. And this mitzorah, his purification process is through 2 holy or kosher birds. Okay, and there's a process how these birds are brought and used to purify the mitzorah, the person who's afflicted with this condition. And the mitzorah, remember, he has to remove himself from the camp of Israel. So it's a very unpleasant situation. And they ask the question, why does this mitzorah, his purification process is affected by 2 kosher birds? Yavo kalanya v'yechaper al kalanya. Well, because one voice comes to atone for the other voice. Now remember, we're talking about an unholy singer. And here in the Bible, we're talking about someone who speaks lashon hara, and he's using his voice to do something improper. And so these birds are songbirds, let's say, of some kind. Usually that would be a dove or something kosher like that has a certain pleasant sound. And the sound of the kosher bird is considered a purification, an atonement for the improper use of his voice. So you see, the way the spiritual exchange takes place is the voice was used improperly, so the fixing is to bring something as a sacrifice that has a proper voice, a holy voice, a voice that doesn't speak lashon hara. Ki nilka mechamad kolo, because the mitzorah was afflicted because of his voice, because of the things he said. Shediber lashon hara, and he spoke evil speech. V'nimtza mishu kasher, and we find that somebody who is kasher, he's a Torah person, he keeps the laws. Nimshechet hanigina shelo min shtei tzipurim chayot torot. That the kosher singer, he draws his voice from these 2 kosher birds, which, of course, what 2 kosher birds are we talking about? We're talking about, in the Zohar, spiritual birds. The name 2 kosher birds is reflecting a level in heaven where the power of song emanates. I've heard it called by Reb Shlomo Karlibach the Shara Nigina. But Katuba Zohar, the Zohar said, Ashtei tzipurim hanal, these 2 birds, Yonkim me'achar nevi'im yonkim, me'atar. The kosher singers draw their life force from the same place, their talent, their ability, that the prophet draws his prophecy. So you see, now we have the prophets, where they draw their prophecy, the kosher singers, where they're getting their songs from, and then we have the unkosher singers, well, where are they getting their songs from? Well, he goes on to tell us, and the Zohar also tells these 2 birds, they drawing their power from the place of the prophets, lekach nikra amenagen chazan. Therefore, the singer is called the chazan in old-fashioned Well, it's not so old-fashioned. The Sephardim still use this phrase for the prayer leader. Miloshen chazon, and chazan literally is the noun form of chazon, the word that refers to a vision. So a prayer leader is really a person who's leading a vision. The chazon, like chazon Ovadia, etc. Va'inu lashon nevuah, and of course that is connected to the idea of prophecy. Ki lokech nigina me'atar de nevi'im yankin, and he takes his song from the place that the prophets take their nevuah. Ukishimin again hu rasha. Now, what happens when the singer is not a good person? He's a rasha. Now, there's many definitions of a rasha. The Rambam starts with the simplest definition, that it's anybody whose bad deeds outweigh their good deeds 51% to 49%. Now, there are many other definitions. We're not going to go into that, but we got the general idea. Of course, another definition of a rasha is someone who breaks Shabbat in public. And another definition would be someone who can't seem to keep the Ten Commandments. Well, this unholy singer takes his song from the unholy or the impure birds of the other side. And again, we're talking about spiritual gateways that are in the transcendental or metaphysical world. And those gateways are always structured in pairs, one side of holiness, one side of unholiness. The Zohar continues, well, we get a more specific description that these birds of the other side, they get their power, their life force from the breasts of the kingship. Or perhaps we should say the queenship. And when it is midnight, the middle of the night, kaden keroza kariz, and then at that time there is a great announcement. Ketziporim achuzot papach kahem yokshim b'nei adam. This is a verse the Zohar brings down. Ketziporim achuzim b'pach. I believe this is King David. Like birds who are trapped in a cage. Kahem yokshim b'nei adam. So too, people struggle with each other. When birds get in a cage, they flap their wings against each other, they hit each other. Maybe it's intentional, maybe it's not, but people can be the same way, I'm sure you can imagine. Because these birds are not in this cage by their own free will. And so too, people who are trapped in the klipa are not really there by their own free will. You might say, well, of course they are. They choose to do certain sins and that trap their souls in the other side. But we have mercy on them and we understand that once a person is attached to the other side gets a hold on him and he becomes, so to speak, a servant of that activity, whatever it might be. Now, our next question is, the repair is that enabled that we could hear the song of every person. That when you go to a concert or a show or somebody singing on the sidewalk, you don't have to ask yourself, is this guy on the level? Is this guy holy or is he unholy? That's not going to be pleasant every time you hear somebody playing music, but rather he says the tikkun for it, that you can hear the music of any person, hu ayidei shilmad b'layla Torah shebal peh, that he needs to learn the oral tradition of the Torah at night. Now that's an interesting idea. Chiefly, of course, that's the Mishnah and the Talmud. Hayinu Gemara shehu bechirat layla. This is the Gemara, which is the aspect of the night. Why do they say that the Talmud is called the aspect of the night? Kedita b'midrash, the midrash says, Keshaya Moshe bahar arba'im yom ba'arba'in laila. Well, when Moses went up to get the Torah, 40 days and 40 nights, lo haya yodea matai yom umatai laila. He did not know in his transcendental state what was day and what was night, because he left the whole framework of human time in this planet. Day and night, sun, daytime, nighttime, darkness, stars, etc. No, when a person's in that transcendental state, he's neither in day or nor night, because he's not at the level of the influence of this planet. And so too was Moses for 40 days and 40 nights. Rak al yedei zeh shaya lomed Torah shebechtav, but only because of the fact that he learned the written Torah, the 5 books of Moses. Haya yodeh shehu yom. Well, he knew then it was daytime. Ukishalamad Torah shebal peh, but when he was learning the oral traditions that would be passed down from him, that was nighttime. Shaya yodeh laila. So his clock was based on the type of Torah he was learning at the time. Isn't that a beautiful thing? Unimsa, we find Torah shebal peh hu bechinat laila. So therefore, the Torah, the oral traditions, is called night, the place, the time of darkness. And as our sages taught, B'mashahaki moshivani, that in the dark places you have returned me. In other words, this of course refers to the exile, that the Jew says, you have returned me from the dark places of exile to bring me home to Jerusalem. Zeh Talmud Bavli. This is the Talmud of Babylon. As it is written, V'lahoshech kara laila. And in the beginning of creation, God called darkness night. So this connection between darkness and night is very old. And now he jumps to another whole level completely. And this is a physiological Kabbalah level. He says that by learning the books of the Talmud, the Shas, he fixes the 6 chuliot in Hebrew. How do they call it in English? You know, the vertebrae of your spine. That those 6, that there are 6 vertebrae that constitute the kaneh, the breath, the windpipe, what we call the trachea. So there are 6 chuliot, or vertebrae there, that move air in and out from the mouth and the nose down into the lungs. Shemehem yotzei hakol, and that is where a person's voice emerges from. V'zeu kumi roni b'layla. Get up, singer of the night. Hayinu sheti'eh tekuma laharina. Rather, we can interpret it as to mean as when you're getting up in joy in the morning. Hayinu aydei laila. Why? Because it's night. What is she? The Gemara Shas. That it's getting up into the Talmud, which is called night. And that is a reason to get up and be joyous. To learn Shas. However, when a person learns Torah for the wrong reasons, not for the name and reputation of God, but I guess one of the worst reasons to learn Torah is so that people will call you rabbi or rav. Such learning is not really considered important in heaven if a person is doing it in order to be called rabbi or rebbe or some other label. But when he learns at night, well, a thread of kindness is drawn upon a person when he learns Torah, especially the Talmud at night. And this thread of kindness guards him. that he will not be hit or afflicted or damaged by bad thoughts. So it's a very interesting thing that we're learning. He did this whole series of ideas was to teach us how you listen to a non-holy singer without it damaging your soul. How? By getting up at night and learning Torah, especially Shas, the 60 Masechtot of the Talmud Bavli, which is called night, and he gets up with joy and says those words of Talmud, then it is a repair of hearing the voice and the song of the unholy person. Why would that be? Well, we could compare it to the level of the intentionality of the singer. We can talk about the subject matter that the singer sings about. We can talk about even the tone and inflection of his voice when he's singing, much less the words. And the intention is obviously derived from the words. So this needs to be fixed. How is it fixed? By learning Torah at night. Now, he doesn't tell us how much, and he doesn't tell us which Talmud we should learn. But those are individual questions. But I could tell you this for certain, my friends, that when I hear the old songs of rock and roll, etc., that I grew up with, I really do feel it hurts me. I feel it brings me down. It makes me sad. It makes me go to places that I'd rather not go, places that don't bring joy. Now, at the same time, there are songs that I hear that bring back beautiful memories, and the beautiful memories are connected to people and places and things that happened, not to the actual singer and his voice. So there is a fine distinction, because if you listen to some old song and it makes you feel nostalgia, now the Zohar says nostalgia is fall in love, but still, if it reminds you of love that you once had, then perhaps it will bring back sparks of love for God today, and that's a very good thing. But we're going to go on with this Torah tomorrow and continue with understanding this distinction between the source of prophecy, the source of holy song, and the source of unholy song. About these gateways in heaven, which of course are accessed through the mind. So I hope you're having a good week and things are okay with you, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. All the best.